how a poor boy created Mercedes-Benz. The Mercedes-Benz car company is one of the oldest and most luxurious in the world. It started with a humble engineer who faced many doubts and failures. Despite this, he proved people wrong and turned his small venture into a world-renowned production car company during the late 19th century. However, the story of Mercedes-Benz took an unexpectedly dark turn when they profited from supplying military vehicles to the Nazis under the work of forced laborers. So sit back and relax. Today, we'll be covering the insane story of Mercedes-Benz and the man who brought automobiles to life, Karl Benz. Karl partnered with a mechanic named August, and together they began operating an iron foundry and mechanical workshop in Mannheim. However, his business partner turned out to be unreliable, and after their tools were impounded by local authorities, their company struggled immensely during its first year. Luckily, Karl met a woman around this time, Bertha Ringer, who would go on to become his wife. Together, they were able to turn the situation around and keep the business afloat during the next 10 years. While Karl was able to show his true genius, making major developments and breakthroughs in his side experiments during this period, most notably developing a gasoline two-stroke engine, his business wasn't going as well as he had hoped. However, by associating with other businesses, he was able to increase production costs slightly and earn a few extra dollars. Karl's biggest supporter was his wife, who would often stay with him in the workshop, offering him new suggestions. But even after adding improvements, people still couldn't see Karl's vision %. The few people who bought the cars were only able to use them for short distances and needed mechanics to be with them at all times. They were also very expensive, leaving them only accessible to the rich. One morning in the summer of 1888, Bertha Benz got up very early, while Karl was still in bed, and hopped into her husband's car to embark on one of the most important journeys in automobile history. She brought along her 2 sons and set out to visit her mother in Pforzheim, which was 66 miles away from Mannheim. Bertha didn't inform her husband nor the police about her plans, most likely because if they knew, they wouldn't let her go at the time. No motorized carriage had ever previously attempted a journey that long, but she was determined to prove the importance of Benz's invention. However, her trip was now walk in the park. Bertha encountered many problems along the way, like crossing dusty and stony roads that were made for horse, having to stop by a pharmacy to get more gas, and even having to perform a few mechanical repairs. The 66-mile trip took Bertha and her 2 sons over 12 hours, but eventually they all made it safely to Pforzheim. More than anything, the trip achieved the goal Bertha had set out to achieve, to make people notice that the automobile was the next big thing. With this, the Benz motorwagon became the talk of the town and received great publicity for Karl's business. Soon enough, Benz and C began to expand quickly, so much so that by 1890, it had become the second largest engine manufacturer in Germany, though not by selling their cars, but rather their stationary gasoline engines. But with the addition of 2 new business partners, Friedrich von Fischer and Julius Gunz, they would soon help to turn this around as they took care of the business and marketing side of things. Benz could focus more on his engineering goals and was able to patent several new car innovations, such as the planetary gear transmission, the double pivot steering, and the flat engine with a boxer configuration. He also designed and manufactured a new and improved automobile at the recommendation of his business partners, which hit the market in 1893. He called it the Benz Victoria. This was a more luxurious 2-passenger vehicle that came with a 3-horsepower engine capable of reaching 11 miles per hour. Thanks to its reliability, the vehicle sold fairly well, but it was its follow-up design, the cheaper Benz Velo, that really took off, with a total production sum of about 1,200 units. The Benz Velo became the world's first large-scale production car in Benz's, the largest automobile company in the world during the 1890s and early 1900s. However, while the Benz company was enjoying its newfound success, it was also feeling a lot of pressure from another company that was stationed not too far away. Daimler Motoring Gesellschaft ER Motoring Gesellschaft was headed by Gottlieb Daimler and Wilhelm Maybach. Both were brilliant engineers, but Gottlieb Daimler in particular was known for being very competitive and had a lot of connections and knowledge of how to run a business, knowledge that Karl Benz seemed to lack. The first Daimler car to be sold commercially appeared in 1892, 2 years later. They followed up with a 2-cylinder car, and in 1897 they introduced their First front-engine model, the Daimler Phoenix. It was clear that the Daimler company was catching up to Benz as their vehicles looked more appealing and comfortable for the public. Mrs. Daimler unfortunately passed away in 1900, leaving Maybach in charge of the company. But it was under Maybach's control that he designed his crowning achievement, the Mercedes 35 horsepower in 1901. What makes this vehicle a specialist that it was the first automobile to assemble our modern idea of a car. It was equipped with a powerful gas engine. Body was wider and larger with a tailored steel chassis, and its center mass was near the ground, initially built for racing. This vehicle was made at the request of a wealthy businessman, Emil Jalink, who decided to name the car after his daughter Mercedes. This car would go on to win multiple street races and hill climb events, going at a top speed of 56 miles per hour. Superior to any other vehicle of its day, this drew a lot of attention to the Daimler company, who decided to rebrand all their vehicles to Mercedes and began producing new models for racing and publicly under the same name. On the flip side, however, this new trend didn't sit well for Karl Benz's partners, who wanted an immediate response to counter their competition. They brought in some French designers to help with a new, faster model. Without the approval of Karl Benz was angry and upset with their decision. He never liked the idea of auto racing and always preferred to drive slowly and carefully. He was horrified by the noise and danger of someone driving at high speeds on public roads. The car built by his team was not a success either, and this became damaging for the Benz company, which suffered further crises between 1903 and 1904. Angry and disappointed, Karl decided to leave his company while still remaining on its board of directors. In the end, he agreed to allow his cars to race, and it ended up being the racing successes that eventually rescued his company. By 1908, Benz had a 120 horsepower racer monster that roared from Leningrad to Moscow, 8.5 hours with an average speed of 50 miles per hour, which was an incredible feat considering how primitive the tracks were at the time. But it was the 200 horsepower Blitz and Benz that would ultimately put the brand in the spotlight. Built in 1909, this race car would break the absolute speed record made by any planet train or automobile of that time, reaching speeds of over 140 miles per hour in 1911. This placed Benz alongside Daimler as some of the most desired cars at the time, and both companies enjoyed good sales in the years to follow. However, this success was short-lived as the First World War broke out, shaking up everybody's lives as well as the global economy following the defeat of Germany in World War I. The country went through an economic recession, and both companies, Daimler and Benz, ended up struggling immensely to strengthen their possibilities of survival. The two companies put their rivalry aside and signed an agreement in 1924 in which they agreed to combine their production and marketing efforts while still retaining their individual names in order to save costs. But this agreement only lasted for 2 short years as the German economy got worse and the two companies were forced to merge completely in 1926, creating a new enterprise called Daimler-Benz. Under Daimler-Benz, the company rebranded their vehicles as Mercedes-Benz and released several impressive models during the late 1920s, such as the Mercedes-Benz Type 630A. ND models Sanscone of their best and brightest engineers who helped develop these vehicles, Ferdinand Porsche, whose name would later become quite famous in the car industry. As for Karl, he remained on the Daimler-Benz board of directors and was able to see the success of his automobiles and marvel at just how far the auto industry had come in his lifetime. Karl Benz passed away just a few short years after the company's merger in April 1929 at the age of 84. After his death, the company continued to grow in size and strength, becoming one of the best performance car makers in the world. But it enjoyed some of its best years under the unlikely leadership Heuristics. When Hitler rose to power in Germany in 1933, he wanted to showcase German forced laborers when the war ended in 1945. The company took a big hit because of the Potsdam Agreement. All German assets abroad were confiscated and used for payment of reparations. This led to Daimler-Benz losing all of its foreign subsidiaries, affiliates, and branches, and they were stripped back to their own plants in their home country. In other words, they had to start all over and build themselves back up again. Daimler-Benz was then restructured and had to denoxify their top management. Because of these drastic changes, the company was able to obtain a production permit from the American occupation authorities in 1946, although their factories suffered severe bomb damage. Mercedes-Benz still had the advantage of owning its own plant, as many other competitors, such as BMW or Adler, lost their sites when they ended up in Soviet territory. The Mercedes-Benz company then focused their efforts on producing ambulances, police patrol vehicles, and delivery vans based around their 170V models, and used one of their plants as our repair facility. for use military transports by 947 they were back to producing passenger vehicles, with only the 145 of their 170 V models being produced that entire year, but even under these less than ideal conditions, Daimler-Benz still managed to turn a profit just 1 year later. By the 1950s, Mercedes-Benz was able to regain much of its influence, making a strong comeback in motorsports events as well as achieving successful sales worldwide. So much so that by 1954, the company had already profited over $1 billion over the years. Mercedes has completely shifted their image and has become one of the most valuable car brands in the world. However, none of that would have been possible without Karl Benz, who, in spite of his humble background, challenges and critics, had the courage and determination to turn his dream into a reality.